Okay, thank you. I'll try to be short, also because I can only be short. First, because I'm presenting on behalf of me. She did all the field work and she talked to the people. I don't know a lot about the sector. We were in strong coordination for actually writing the report, but all the details that she knows them much better. And also, as Christian was saying, this kind of a specific type of project, it was added on, like this governance network study, we tried to add that on to actually an implementation of a sanitation in developing country study. So it was more of a developing project and not a scientific or less of a scientific project. We added that governance network study on top. So we can go less deep, I guess. Still, I try to highlight a couple of things that we found out. We'd also be happy to get questions and feedback, because we still feel that the report, we can sharpen that a little bit to some of the main messages, but I'll try to highlight a couple of messages here. So first, the research question, then I give you some elements of the added value of our study, which we believe there are some of them. Shortly about the theoretical framework, methodology and data, results, and 3 specific recommendations that are related to that specific part that I'm focusing on. So in the report there's more. I kind of cut out some things that I found were most interesting. So, in general, you see an improvement over time in the last, let's say, 2 decades of the sanitation situation in Vietnam. In generally, more and more households get connected to sanitation installations. But there's still 2 important issues of actually implementation of that in the system. There's a lot of households which are connected to wastewater treatment plants at the end. Wastewater treatment plants are built, but they're not working properly, right? So it's on a technical side, things are not working properly. And then with respect to fecal sludge management, which would be an alternative way to actually deal with waste from households, there's a new regulation, and everybody they're kind of proud of that Decree 80 that regulates fecal sludge management in Vietnam, but there's no implementation. So people are very proud of a new decree, but at some point they also realize that that's probably not that's not enough. Nothing is gonna happen if it's just staying at the level of that decree. So you could say, well, it's only a problem of implementation, but that's probably where the most important things happen. So if in political science we're focusing, or those people are focusing on implementation of policies in political science, they're basically saying, yeah, that's where you want to look at if you want to understand why things don't work. You don't want to look at how decrees are produced or how legislation is made. If you want to know why things work on the ground or not, then you have to look at implementation and at implementation failures. And then that's kind of 2 elements that are related to this issue of implementations, which already actually take some of the theoretical arguments. So these conflicts of interest between different stakeholders and different stakeholders who have different competences are actually continuing during the implementation process, that are not finished once a decision is made on a higher level. And there's some Vietnam is still a communist system. You can very much feel that hierarchical type of top-down policy making, where you would assume naively that everything that's decided on the top level is just straight implemented on the bottom, which is not happening at all. And so there's very much of this thinking within sectors of that sanitation system, and very few cross-sectoral interactions on the local level, for example, of, let's say, health specialists, infrastructure specialists, sanitation specialists, etc. That is not really happening. Based on this kind of general challenge, we were asking what is that governance network of sanitation and fecal sludge management issues in Vietnam, a very descriptive question. But from describing this entire system of stakeholders and their network, we were hoping to get out some messages of what could be done, and I think we got a couple of them. So the added value of our study is, first, certainly just presenting a simple overview of actors involved in these issues in the country. That already has value to these, for example, to the funders of the development initiatives that Eawag is working on. And we also had so after that study that we've done on, which is based on Hanoi and the national level, but then actually focusing on Hanoi, we had an additional interest from an association who wanted to have a similar study in a more rural area, and we were happy to do that. So just the fact to know who is actually around there and dealing with those issues is important. Then we analyze their roles and perceptions of challenges. Why are things not working? And finally, we identify coordination challenges specifically across different domains. So for example, the health domain and the infrastructure domain and the financial issues that are related to these questions. These different responsibilities that I mentioned are very strongly hierarchically organized within the administration. Between the public and the actually almost non-existing private sector, that's another challenge. And between different levels of decision making. Decree 80 is a national level decree, but if it needs to trickle down to the bottom, then there needs to be some coordination across these levels. So these three types of coordination challenges within the governance system, we try to get to know something about them. The theoretical framework, I guess there's two types of, I mentioned them before, there's two types of important concepts that we're working with. One is this idea of really, and it might appear naive to a lot of you, but this idea of that once things are getting implemented, once things are decided and getting implemented on the ground, then actually the political conflict is over and it's just a matter of technical implementation, which is, at my institute, a lot of engineers and natural scientists are working. They believe that, right? They believe that if the politics have made decision, then everything is working well. And that's just not true. So we kind of problematize and describe the implementation process as very much as a bottom-up process where a lot of different stakeholders and actors still are active and fight over the interpretation, over resources, and over smaller decisions that need automatically to be made in an implementation. So that's kind of the first element, and the second elephant in the room is always network governance. If you see a presentation of mine, almost always. So within that implementation, or the challenge across the different stakeholders, we focus on this concept of network governance, on actually observing the different types of networks among these actors across domains, sectors, and levels, as I mentioned before. And we specifically focus on information exchange as one type of relation between actors, right? Which is so information exchange is, on the one hand, technical information exchange, which is needed to actually implement this, but also information exchange on more administrative procedures, on opportunities for financing, etc., on coordination, on standards. So it's a kind of a broad type of relation between actors once they're actually just talking about how to implement these issues. We identified about 30 key actors active in the Vietnamese urban sanitation sector, so on the Hanoi level, national level, and then also the international level, a couple of international organizations which play important roles there. And you'll see in a minute of how they are located within the entire network. This is mostly based on document research and then interviews with experts to identify these key actors and to get to know whether we actually missed something or whether we are pretty complete in just identifying the ones which are playing an important role there. And then we went to see these representatives of these actors. There's mostly administrative actors. I was saying before that there's if you assume the NGOs to be kind of non-state actors, then they're about the only ones that are dealing with these issues in Vietnam. There's not a lot of private businesses, and for the implementation of the fecal sludge management as it is planned by international organizations, there needs to be some private incentives and there needs to be some private actors and that work according to the business incentives within the fecal sludge management system. So we applied a couple of basic tools of network analysis to grasp the important structures and positions of actors that we see in there. And I'm just going to show you a couple of results related to that. So this is basically this is the network that we came up with. I hate those people that do that because it's basically just saying, wow, look at our amazing and complex data here, but there's nothing you can actually see, right? And now here it's not entirely true. I want you to see something, which is the first result, and it was also mentioned in the morning. There is a mismatch between activity in that network in terms of information exchange, who is actually doing things, and who are the ones that are influential in making the decisions. Those are the big dots there. So dot size basically represents the actors that are perceived by all the others to be the most influential ones in terms of making the decisions. And it's all these national ministries, basically. There's a People's Committee, which is a political body at the regional level, which is important. But so it's these national ministries of planning and investment, construction, and natural resource and environment. Some of them are pretty active in terms of actually getting things done and exchanging with other actors, but others are not. And some of them, which are super active in terms of exchanging with other actors, they're in fact not the ones who take the decisions at the end. So there's already kind of a mismatch there, which I think is a representation also of that very hierarchical type of communist organization within the administration related to the specific issue. Then I would just like to highlight 3 results more specifically to that cross-sector, cross-domain, and cross-level coordination. With respect to the sector, so we're dealing with what we're applying here is the public sector and the private sector. There's a first result, which is already independently of that network analysis, already identifying the actors that are there and are active with respect to sanitation issues. We see there's almost no private sector organizations around there, which maybe is not per se a problem, but if you look at what the international organizations and also that Eawag-led project wanted to achieve in terms of fecal sludge management, for example, and also implementation or the running of wastewater treatment plants, is to create incentives for private actors, small businesses, to actually be active in that sector. For the moment, they're not even there. So one question is whether that's the right strategy if private businesses are kind of non-existing in that domain. And some of them are, so there are a couple of semi-private, which look private, but they're still actually run by the administration by the local administration. So this is a first striking finding, I guess, only by identifying the different actors. The second one is this challenge of actually bringing in different domains that that should play an important role when dealing with sanitation issues. And I'm just going to focus on one specific issue. So here you see the green ones are the local level actors, and you see that health issues are very low. They're really not dealing with any health related issues, even though it should have. So having a proper sanitation management situation working should have direct benefits for the health at the local level, right? And in general, this is kind of the lowest consideration of all these actors as compared to infrastructure and finances. And so the technical aspects are important. They deal with these technical aspects, and the health issue is kind of lower, especially at the local level. which we also found quite striking on. And then with respect to the different levels of decision making, here we basically aggregated that network that we saw before. Here we have all these local levels, the international ones and the national ones. And there's a couple of things that you see there, but the strength of those ties basically show how intense they exchange information. And the shocking thing, what kind of shocking thing, is that there's not a lot of things going on between the national level and the local level. So the national level, which actually is responsible for that decree and now expects implementation, and the local level, which is kind of the local administration and a couple of these semi-private businesses, emptying companies and construction companies at the local level. There's very few exchange here, and a lot of that goes through the international level. So international NGOs are in contact with both levels and play a very important broker role in that system. Again, if you compare that to the first network, they're not the ones which are reputed to be the ones that actually take the final decision, but they are very important here if you look at that aggregation in terms of making information pass through that system. Okay, so 3 recommendations. I discussed that this morning. It's hard for me to give recommendations based on research, so we kind of tried our best, but would still need feedback. But based on what we saw here is there's certainly an importance of providing capacities or to invest in capacity building on the local level with respect to local authorities, but also sanitation services, be they public or private. Then with respect to these different domains, I guess it's an importance of increasing the public awareness of the health issues related to sanitation. And then finally, with respect to that last triangle that I showed you, there could be, we're having a similar thing in another case where the project where I'm involved in basically established a platform of exchange between national level people and the local administrators. They usually just don't talk to each other, and if it's kind of if it's initiated from the outside, then it's an opportunity to actually talk to each other. So improving that communication between the national and the local level. Thanks.
Thank you.